Well, good morning, everybody, and thanks for attending. I'm glad you could find the room. It's just my luck I get put right in the back most corner, right? I am Chad Thompson, Senior Principal Consultant with Progress, and I'm glad that didn't dissuade you from showing up either. So thank you for coming, and this will be doing more with PASOE and Spring. What I hope to do through this presentation is just get you thinking about, is there something else that this wonderful framework that we're standing on, is there something else that I could potentially find in there? Is there a gem in there? Is there something that might suit a particular business case? Is there a feature in there that maybe if I flip a switch, all of a sudden all my problems are solved? Right? Lots of different avenues you can take with Spring Framework. So what we're going to be going over here, of course, I'm going to go over a little bit of an introduction, get you ready for what it is I'm going to be covering. Some of this stuff can get pretty technical, and I'm going to try to skirt around all the setup and configuration, things like that. We can take as much time later on or offline or anything like that to cover anything technical. We're going to do a brief PASOE architecture review because a lot of this stuff, of course, is based on PASOE, and you have to have at least a good mindset of the directory structure and how the PASOE product is organized. I'm going to skip right into a use case and demonstration. I'm going to pick out of the air just an idea of what is it that we might be able to use Spring for. And then, of course, if we have time, hopefully we do, time for some questions and answers and such. So right off the get-go, big blue disclaimer. I wanted to put more legalese up here. Unfortunately, I don't know a lot of the legalese stuff. I don't read it myself. Just be known that nothing I'm about to show you up here is actually supported. So somewhere up here, there's a really, really small fine print that says, don't call support if you break it, right? So the idea is, the concept that I'm talking about here is that there is a ton of features and a ton of goodness inside of PASOE that we have yet discovered. We have not yet found all the goodness that it can actually give us. For example, as you should be aware, and of course by the title and why you're here, Spring Framework, for example. These days, Spring Framework is known as one of the best of breed architectures in the Java world. It's been battle tested and it's well mature and maintained by the community. So it has a ton of features inside of it. So with all that being said, you say, wow, can we use any of this goodness, Chad? If it has all these magic bells and whistles and features, can we use it? Well, little spoiler alert, yes, you can. You can actually dig in there and start using the Spring Framework features for yourself. And again, as I pointed out, some of this stuff might get maybe a little heady. I tried to keep it as abbreviated as possible to go through this, and I think it's okay. I think we'll be all right. But I will be touching on a lot of Java. I'm also using the Spring provided Eclipse IDE, and I run just about everything through Docker. So if any of these things, make your hands shake or whatever, don't worry about it. It's not a requirement. None of these things are a requirement. Anybody who's familiar with the OpenEdge, the open client, the Java open client, a lot of the technology and a lot of the classes and objects I'll be showing are on parallel with the Java open client. So we'll do just a quick little architecture review here of PASOE. So coming from the top down, a web request would come in, and as we know, the PASOE platform is based on Tomcat. So Tomcat will receive this request, and one of our web transports, whether it's web, REST, APSV, intercepts that call, and then the Spring Framework kicks in. And the primary feature of the Spring Framework that PASOE is using is, of course, Spring Security. And we all know and love Spring Security, right? We're all working with that. It's easy to configure and debug and analyze. It's wonderful. Now, as you can see here in the middle, I put some puzzle pieces in there to kind of show you that the Spring Framework is a componentized, plug-and-play, if you will, framework. So if there's stuff you like that's not currently available in it, download it, drop it in, should just work. Right? It's a plug-and-play type, plug-in based architecture. The one feature, of course, that we're using inside of the PASOE ecosystem is Spring Security. And then once you've passed all your security checks, now you're down inside of the multi-session agent, and you're actually executing your ABL code. So the question I asked was, number one, is there any way that I could access some of these other components inside of Spring? Can I use any of those? And then secondarily, being a progress or being primarily an ABL guy, is there any way that I can get those calls, that Java code, that Spring code, to execute my ABL code? So hopefully, as we move through this, we'll come to the answer of, yes, that works, and yes, you can. And the other question is what else can you do? What else could you do with this? So we'll look at a use case, and I plucked a use case out of the air, and I said, okay, if I'm going to pick a feature, I can either pick a feature and then write code around it, or pick a use case and then code around that. So I went with a use case. We see up here, what was that? Yeah. As an OpenEdge developer, I need to be able to schedule execution of code, and I want to do it in an easy way, a minimally configurable way. I don't have to write a lot of configuration to make this thing work. So with that said, what kind of ideas come to mind? Right? You have to run code at certain points. I want to schedule things. So what comes to mind right off the top of your head? Cron, right? Everybody's going to run cron. Maybe if you're on a Windows platform, I'm sorry. If you're on a Windows platform, maybe you're going to use Windows Scheduler or something like that. So with this use case in mind, I took it one step further. I said people who are going to run PAS, hopefully they've gone off to the ESD and they've downloaded the Docker container that has PAS already pre-built, pre-installed, ready to go. So if you're going to be in that Docker container, and up here, it's not required. You don't have to use the container for this. It just makes a better use case for me. So my argument is this, is that if you take that hard line of how do you build containers? How do you build Docker containers? There's a group out there that would suggest that when you're running a Docker container, you have one container and one process inside of it. Now everybody here said, well, if I need to schedule a task, I'll just use cron. So if I was building a container, I'll just go ahead and I'll install cron inside of it. Right? So when I do my build steps, I'll say install cron, and also run PASOE. So now I'm running two processes in there. So if you take this hard line of one process, one container, I've just broken that rule. Does it work? Sure. But if you look at it from that point of view, how can I get around that? Spring Task Scheduler to the rescue. I can use the Task Scheduler plugin that's inside of Spring already. And I'll just configure him and I'll say, look, why don't you do all the running for me? Why don't you do the execution for me? And I still only have PASOE executing inside of that container. Whew. Wish this thing wasn't so sensitive. Okay. So the process here is, what I would do is I would start at the ABL side, being an ABLer. And what I'll do is I'll define ABL, and I'm going to use classes. You can use procedures too if you like, straight up .ps. I use classes because I like the idea of defining an interface. I know what the methods are inside of here. I can guarantee that each of the classes will have these methods inside of it. And then what I'll do is I'll go off and I'll write the Spring side of things to call all that ABL code. And of course, the simple configuration requirement, a couple lines of XML. Now, these graphics, I was kind of seeing if they would be clear from back there. They're a little off, but I got the real deal set up on the laptop too, so we'll bring that up if we have the time. What I'm showing here is I used the Spring STS. That's their development suite, the Spring tool suite. And it's just an Eclipse IDE. It's just like PDSOE. So if you wanted to, you could use PDSOE, and as long as you have all the Java stuff in there, all of this stuff should work. Second bullet point, we talk about if you're going to build Spring tools, you need to be, or Spring code, you have to reference all of the Spring libraries that are part of PASOE. So what I did is I just said, I don't know which ones I need, I'll just include them all. So I brought them all into my project and said, there, I'll figure out which ones I actually need later and trim the fat, right? One idea here is you might consider making a Maven project so you can actually manage your dependencies a little cleaner. And at the end of the day, what I'm hoping to do is build a jar file, right? I'm going to compile all these classes, I'm going to package them as a jar file, and I'm going to make sure they get deployed to the PASOE platform by putting them in the right spot, somewhere in that directory architecture of PAS. So again, a pretty iffy graphic, I guess. But the concept here is I'm just highlighting a couple of key locations inside the standard PASOE directory structures. So under your instance directory, and the instance directory is the one that you would use the tcman command to actually create the instance. This isn't the directory underneath your DLC folder. There's a folder called common lib. Anything that you put inside of there is shareable amongst all your other classes and all your other web apps inside of that instance. So if I put my own custom Java code, Java classes in there, any other web app can execute that code. The high-level OpenEdge folders where we put shareable R code that I want all of my ABL apps to be able to run. Excuse me. Okay. And then inside of the actual web apps folder, up here, this has just got the default root web app. In there, you have your web.inf folder. And I've highlighted a couple files that I'll be looking at. Number one is the logging.xml, so I can tweak all the verbosity of what comes out of Spring. As well, the web.xml. If I'm going to put new features in, what I don't want to do is hack the web.xml and just tear it apart and make it my own configuration, because now when I upgrade, I've got a problem, right? When I go to a PAS 12, I've got to merge all those changes. So here, with this copy of WebXML, what I've done is I've suggested a very simplistic change. It's one line. One line of XML injects all of my custom code. So starting at the ABL level, this is an example of the code that I produced to execute my tasks. So on the left, and again, I apologize if it's difficult to read. On the left is my interface definition. I just said, let's put something in there that any class that implements this interface, excuse me, they'll have this method in it, run all scheduled tasks. So the class on the right, what's going on here, I'd put some logging in so we can see what's going on. And of course, because the interface requires this method, there's the method. That could be for each delete table. That could be, find some stuff in a queue and kick it off. All I'm doing is just throwing out a random number. And of course, as part of my interface, I said, when you do stuff, tell me how much you did. So I return back an integer. Pretty straightforward. Any questions on that? Okay. So now I'm on the Java side. Now I'm over back into the Eclipse world, into the Java side. On the right-hand side is my Java code that I just built a entry point in there, and you can call it anything you want. The one caveat is it can't take any parameters. So over here I've got run OE tasks. You can call it any name you like, as long as it doesn't take any parameters. From this point, if I run down a little bit, right about here, line 77, is where I've actually, essentially, I've created my Java open client, right, the OpenEdge Java open client, so I'm reaching across in the Java world, and I'm telling it, go ahead and get me an instance of that class object, and inside of there, I know, because it should have that interface, I know there should be a method in there called run all scheduled tasks. Go. It executes, returns an integer. I'm just logging out the integer. And then I'm performing best practices and cleaning up or releasing any connections. Questions so far? On the right side is the Spring configuration to enable this. So on the right side, what's going on here is that we've created a thread pool. I've just limited it to 2 additional threads. So now you have Tomcat with all of his request threads and response threads and all those crazy things, and I've just added 2 more to the pile. But I'm going to use them for my own purposes. I'm going to use them for scheduling tasks to run. So that's all that configuration right there. And if I didn't indent it so much, that would be 1 line, right? You can do everything in 1 line. Here, at this section, what I'm doing is I'm saying that class I just wrote, load it up into memory, create it as a bean. So now it's a stateful object that sits up in memory. And these last 2 lines say, when you want to run something on app server or PAS, where do you go? So internal next generation app server, right, just means the app server I'm standing on, the app server that's built in. And the second line is saying, and here's the procedure or class I want you to run. So connect to this app server, run this class. And then in this last section, I've said I'm going to set up a series of scheduled tasks, 1 or more, and when they run, use this thread pool to execute them. And now I put in my scheduled task in here. And so this one just says, all right, we're going to use this executor example, this class, and inside of it, I want to kick off this method. And again, the only requirement to the method is that it doesn't take any parameters. And then down here, now I can do that cron statement that you would have produced anyway. I'll put that cron statement in, and everything should start ticking away. Okay? Notice down here, last bullet point, this is where your proxy gen, Java Open Client best practices come into play. You really need to be diligent about not polluting the Spring or Java memory space when you're doing techniques like this. And this is one of the dragons, right? So this line is implementing that customization. This is the stock web.xml that comes with when you do your instance creation or you install PASOE. Up near the top is where they turn on all the security features, where the security features are enabled. And I put 1 extra line in. I said, my scheduling configurator, or XML, put it in 2. So what will happen at startup time is all the security features and beans and everything that you're already working with gets all loaded up. And then my scheduler stuff gets loaded up too. 1 line change. Upgrade to V12. Oh my goodness, you changed your web.xml? Yeah, 1 line. I can put it back, right? So again, I apologize for the font size that's going up on there. But what this is I let it run for a little while, and I took some screenshots of it purring away. This bigger one is the actual session log up at the Tomcat level. And what we can see right up here, and I can go back and look at the code again, but this is where I actually load up the XML, and here's my instance of my class being instantiated. And then after a little while of waiting around, my development server spins up. I connect to the app server. I'm going to kick off this class. And so same idea, it keeps going, ticking along every, and what did I have there, 15 seconds? So every 15 seconds, the Java class task executor does his thing, calls the class, and then all I have him doing is logging out whatever he got back from PAS. And then at the bottom, or sorry, from the ABL side. So he's just logging out how many tasks were run. Down here on the ABL side, same idea, just logging out. I'm working now. Here's what I'm running. I've just done 50 tasks, 1,000 tasks. Okay, so my use case was I want to be able to schedule stuff. But this, and pardon me, out of the box, you get all the wonderful security features, not to mention the SAML and OAuth 2 integration. What else can Spring do, and what can you do with it? So I picked a use case where it was just, hey, I want to be able to schedule stuff. It's up to you guys to dream big. What else do you want it to do? What else can it do? One of my favorite ones up here is the Spring integration layer. This is where I'm popping up here. Okay. Where this one implements enterprise integration patterns. And that's a super wonderful technical term. What it means is that these guys, these developers, have gone off and they've built different ways of integrating between systems. One of the plugins that they have is FTP configuration. I want a file to be read from an FTP server. Maybe it gets processed and then it gets written to another FTP server. Sometimes there's RabbitMQ configuration, all kinds of other loosely coupled integration patterns. But all those plugins, all those features are there. You turn them on with minimal XML. Okay, so where will you go next with Spring? What are you going to do with it? I'm going to go ahead. By the way, when I came in and I started up everything, those of you who are hanging around, I started my task scheduler going when I started the talk. So it's been ticking away back there, doing its thing. So it's just pumping out messages to the log every 15 seconds. Hopefully, yeah. Okay, any questions? Go ahead.
Chad, so that's running on one of the multi-session agents? So it's consuming one of the multi-session agents when your scheduler, when your schedule class runs?
Okay.
But it's not part of the REST request, so that's the REST request comes in, that's its own multi-session thread, and this one is its separate.
Right. So if I phrase the question, is this tasking or utilizing the multi-session agent / sessions? And the answer is yes, it is. It acts like it starts another ABL session as if a request came in from the web, from a REST request or an APSV request, but it didn't come from the outside. It actually came from within. Right? There's another dragon, right? It came from within. So he's ticking along, doing his thing. But yes, he does spin up his own connection to the app server, and he does create his own session on the app server. And again, I put in, the local app server, the one I'm standing on. Is it possible that I could connect to a different one? Sure, but I'm standing on one. I'm going to use this one. Other questions? Anybody else? One of the little guys I put into here. Oh, how about this? All the code that I've shown, all the screenshots, plus all the stuff I'm about to show, it's all available on my GitHub repository, so you can go off and grab that code, have a look at it, see what you think. Here's the XML in real life. And again, there's I'm going to run a scheduled task every some period. This cron statement is very, very similar to your typical Unix cron statement. I think there's one extra element in here that Spring has added, but they actually have this websites out there where you could say, generate me a Spring scheduler statement. And there's other styles of scheduling. I've put in some notes in here. Right now I'm using a cron scheduled. But maybe there's a need to say, only run it so many times, or wait a couple minutes, then run it. Or wait until that one's done. I want to make sure they actually stack and they don't overlap when these tasks run. So you could configure that to suit your need. Let's see. This is the actual scheduler class here that I developed. And again, I've just got a logger going. Not a lot of Java code here in my, I'm not afraid to go to the Java side. It's a little darker over there, but it's nice. They have treats. But the idea is that maybe you would write those ABL interfaces first. And then when you come over to the Java side, you know what that looks like because you've probably coded to an interface. So you should be able to come back to the Java side here and write this code, whoops, write this code once and make it completely generic. Notice here it's what I'm passing in and telling it to run is just a string. So what if I maybe parameterize that and configure it so that it gets passed in and says, here, run this. So now this can be completely generic, and I just tell it what to do every couple of minutes. Tell it what method inside that class to run. Tell it what, yeah, you get it. You get the meaning. The sample I've got up here started off as just a simple little hello world, hello next 2009, 21.9 anyway. And so what if I wanted to run this guy? You know, let's implement this, because right now he's not doing his thing. He's this ticking over here is still just the other guy kicking off. So okay, I'm going to go ahead and turn Mr. Print Messages on. If I come into here, I'll run them at the same rate, so I'm going to go ahead and borrow this snippet. And I'm going to go into that same class, because that's where the hello world is, right? The hello, what do we call it? Print Messages. Let's keep that on the clipboard. And so I'm going to say, every certain period, go into this bean and run that method. Maybe I'll do it, let's do this one a little faster maybe. Let's try that. Okay, so I save that off. Now what I have to do is I have to get that over to my PASOE instance, wherever it's running. Turns out my PASOE instance is running just as I submitted before. It's running as a Docker container. It's on this system. But I need to be able to get my resources over there. And got the XML, we're good to go. If I needed to, if I changed any Java code, I've got the little jar compiler set up here, so it rebuilds and repackages my jar file for me. And again, that Maven step that I mentioned before eases a lot of those concerns. It takes care of all that technicality for you. This is about as simple as I could make it, though. So what I'm going to have to do is restart my PAS instance. Okay, for anybody who's morbidly curious, this is Docker compose run my PAS instance. So I'm just going to fire up a container, PAS in it, and then what I also have it doing is I've customized it a little bit to where it synchronizes all of the artifacts that I've built. So we'll see here where it copies over my progress code, my ABL code. It also copies over my XML configs, things like that. And I just have it barking out what it's doing for a little bit of sanity. And we'll just push him off. Meanwhile, that's no big deal. There we go, tickety tick. Yeah, nobody wants to see that. But he's ticking along. There's hello. What did I set him to? 5 seconds? So let's see if he ticks every 5 seconds here. There's 5, 10, 15. That's the other one. That's the other one who kicked off. So that's the second task. And you can tell I set up the thread pool to be two threads. Number one is they're named. Right? I know which thread pool is kicking off, so I can name the specific thread pools. This is the accounting nightly roll-ups thread pool, maybe. I'm dreaming here a little bit. And it gives you which thread actually did the execution. So this was executed on thread 2. This was executed on thread 1. Okay. Exciting. Right? Woohoo! And it worked, right? It worked. It was really simple. Did I meet my demands of my use case statement? I need to be able to schedule tasks. I need to be able to do it with minimal configuration. I think those are true statements. I think I've done that. I think I've done that. What do y'all think? Yeah. Let's see here. So just wanted to show that there's the repository with all the code checked in. If anybody wants to take it for a spin, of course, if you wanted to issue a pull request after you've modified it wonderfully, enhanced it, I'll gladly have a look at it. I've taken it off into its own branch already, into a different direction, and using it for certain projects I'm on. This, by the way, is the Spring resource, spring.io, and there is no end of documentation on here and demos and information on all the different components and functionality, the different projects that make up the Spring framework. Look at this. This is pages of information, right? We, as PASOEers, are focused mainly on the Spring security module. So all the information we've ever wanted to know about Spring security should be somewhere in here. What else can Spring do? What else can we use it for? Right? One of my favorites is this one, the Spring integration feature set. So we have sample code. We have 50 plus integration samples. Go try some out. Go see if they fit any of your use cases or any of your business needs. A lot of the time I will present ideas to people on different projects, and they'll say, oh yeah, we can't do that because we don't have the architecture, we don't have the resources, we don't do that. Well, you're standing on Spring Framework, you're standing on PASOE, you have everything you need to do what we've talked about. You have it. All you have to do is explore it, and you've got to be a little brave. But I think that it's well documented, well supported. The Spring product is. But again, a little reminder: the technique that I've shown you, that you can't call support if that goes sideways. Okay. So use it sparingly. Use it in the lab, and if you find that it passes your tests, enjoy. Let's see. Any questions, concerns, stock tips? No? Thank you for your attention. I've been Chad Thompson. You've been a wonderful audience. Please rate. And by the way, there was a question.
I have one.
Yes.
Can you go into the field of filter bin and actually mingle around with the HTTP request and send some of the information on?
Okay. So did I hear pre-auth filter bean?
Yes.
So can you, and what was the word, mingle?
Yes.
Can I mingle around with the pre-authorization filter bean? So can I get into the security context from there? The short answer is yes. Should you? Please don't. Yes.
That's not entirely true. I mean, if you have an authorization header, it's stripped off.
Yeah.
So if you use the web transport, everything you receive everything, all the headers,
Yeah.
except for the authorization one, which is a little bit odd if you have a JWT token,
Yeah.
which you want to reuse. So what you can do is copy the authorization header before it's stripped off, make an X authorization header, and then pass that one over.
Right. So the statement up here was you can't necessarily get at the authorization header. You would have to do it early, make a copy of it, and then replay the authorization is what you're suggesting. And while yes, that is true, two things. Number one is this, remember this executor, he's executing on his own schedule and in his own thread pool and off under the hood. Meanwhile, as was pointed out earlier, this isn't a request that comes in from the web, right? So we might not even, well, most likely, we won't even have that security information. We won't have that authentication object. And again, to the original question, I interpreted the authentication object, the security token itself, not the header. So you can get at that, but because you're ticking off in your own space and you're really out of context, it wouldn't mean much.
Okay, let me
In this example.
the use case behind the scenes.
Sure.
Because I'm not interested in the token itself. I'm actually interested in some of the information from the HTTP requests, like the user agent. But it's before authentication, so it's before actually it succeeds and I can log it on. In this case, is that I want to be able to log some of that attempts to access the application.
The attempts to access it,
Yes,
sure.
the attempts, not
Sure.
exactly the successful attempts.
Well, with regard to the logging, right, there's been great enhancements to the logging in V12. Look to Mr. Banks's presentation. You can download that one. He did a great job on illustrating all the new changes to the logging. Hopefully there's things in there that we can switch on that will show. Go ahead, Roy.
Many of the changes that are in the
And many more.
for 11.7.4 also, but you have to go ahead and configure them yourself. So some is available in 11.7.4.
Right.
But
And if I
it's
take...
not standard. We didn't change anything more simple. You have to do it yourself.
So if I put the question into the recording, or the answer into the recording, there's a lot of enhancements that allow you to do some of these things, insights into intrusion detection, should I say? And as well, to take your question off, again, onto the side, if it was strictly Spring, you can put your own class in there to manage all of the security. You could have your own class. Right now, it implements the Progress Spring Security class. You could put your own and bake your own and run yours and do what you need to do with it. Any others? Okay, once again, thanks for your attention. I've been Chad Thompson. You've been a wonderful audience, and please rate the session in the app. Thank you. Oh.